So let me just tell you, the first thing it could be is ventilation of the backside of your refrigerator. Okay, it could very well be that. The other thing is you have a blockage in your cooling unit. Okay, so ventilation of the backside, I do have several videos in our refrigerator playlist on how, I was going to draw a picture, but I've done it enough times. So let's just focus here on what your problem, it's only going to be one of two things. If your ventilation is not correct up the backside, so let's just do, here's your refrigerator right here. Okay, here's your slide room, and here is the lower vent, and then here is the upper vent. Okay, so air wants to come in through here and go out. Okay, and so if you don't have any baffling and all this kind of stuff, then the air's lazy. It's going to take the path of least resistance. It's not going where it needs to go. On your refrigerator, I said it's one of two things, so we're focusing on the first thing it could be right here. So on the top of your refrigerator, you have these little fins there, and the air must go through those condenser fins. It must, and if it's not, then you're going to have performance issues as you're explaining. So you have to make sure, if you open up this top vent and you can take your eyeball and you can look down inside, you're going to have performance issues on your refrigerator as you're explaining. So what we need to do, and I know I've got a refrigerator, I've got a video on this, creating a flashing. You go to Harbor Freight, get yourself a little brake press where you could take a piece of flashing you got at the hardware store and bend it. I do a video on how I did that. You're going to want to attach that so that the air that comes in has to go through those fins, and then you put a flashing on the top. Okay, so if your refrigerator, now this is if it's in a slide room. If it is not in a slide room, same thing, guys. You need to make a good proper chimney. So here we have our fins, and then here is our exhaust, here's our roof, here's our thing. So we need to make sure that there's a baffle that's forcing that air to go through the fins. Okay, so if it's not going through the fins, I don't care how awesome your refrigerator is and how awesome all your components are, it's not shedding the heat off of that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing it could be, so I'm going to move on to the next thing. So make sure you have a good chimney up your refrigerator. And I do have several videos on that, me putting them in, me talking about it, me drawing pictures. The next thing it could be is a blockage. Okay, so visualize this with me. You're going to open up your lower access hatch here. You're going to see the absorber vessel here. Here's your boiler, okay? And then you have this tube that comes out and goes up like that. And then you have, coming out the side here, you have these little fun little curly Q things, okay? That's the absorber vessel. This is the absorber vessel. This is the absorber. It's called the absorber, and that's the absorber vessel. So what you have in here is distilled water and ammonia. So here is your boiler, okay? So what I want you to feel for, you're going to have one of three configurations. Your refrigerator has been running for maybe an hour, and you need to do this when it's running. You could do it on electric or gas, it doesn't matter. So what I want you to do is I want you to feel the heat of that boiler. Put your hand on it, feel the heat of it. And then I want you to reach up inside and feel the heat of the absorber. They should be equal within 10 degrees. So if this is 100 degrees here, we want this to be about 100 degrees. This is after it's been running for a while. If you have that situation, your refrigerator is healthy and happy, you have good circulation through the whole thing, okay? Now, let's say it's been running for, so let's do this as boiler, and this is absorber, okay? This is absorber, this is boiler, okay? So if they're equal, we're good. If the boiler absorber, if the absorber is hotter than the boiler, that is to say, this is so hot, you can touch it. This is hot, the boiler is always gonna be hot, but this is like super, super hot. You can't even touch it, it's really hot. Then you have a leak, we call that a leaker, L-E-A-K. That might be evidenced by some yellow sodium chromate that you might see down in here, this little yellow powdery stuff that you might show up. It's dissolvable in water, you could take some water and dissolve it, but if you have any yellow down here, what has happened is you've got a breach in your cooling unit. The hydrogen has left. Hydrogen's out of the building. And so you're boiling your ammonia into not a hydrogen environment. You're just boiling the heck out of your ammonia, and it's working its way around here, and it's just, it's not doing anything. So if you have a breach, you see yellow sodium chromate. If you don't see it, sometimes I've even seen the yellow sodium chromate in here, and you got to take the thing apart to see it. So it's not always there. It could be inside. But that's warm and that's hot. You have a leak. The other way is if the boiler is hot, but the absorber is not. So now we're going to touch these things. That's really hot and that stays cold. Okay, so if that's a situation, then you have a blockage. Okay, B-L-O-C-K-A-G-E. Okay, a blockage, that means that as your cooling unit, as your ammonia is making its loop and it does all of its fancy things, it's got a blockage. It's not making it to where it needs to go. And typically what we find is I've saved several of these cooling units because we do a lot of cooling unit replacements. We just did one yesterday. We do a lot of these, and we work with a company, RV Cool, out of California. They're a great company to work for if you need a cooling unit, so I'm going to give him a shout out. He doesn't know I'm doing this. I'm not being paid, but we've done so much work with them that I'm so pleased with the work we're getting from RV Cool that I think Chris is doing a great job down there. So there you go. But we do so many, normally he would want them back. But we just did an Oracle 1200 yesterday. He doesn't want it back. He's like, there, we got enough. We don't need any more. Please don't pay the shipping to ship it back to us. So I have these, and I'm going to be slicing them open. And we're going to be cutting them open in different places and seeing what's inside. So that's going to be on our Patreon Academy side. I don't know if I'm going to do it for the YouTube side. I'm going to do that on the Patreon side. So that's another reason to join us over there. So typically what we find is you have the distilled water, the hydrogen, the ammonia, and the sodium chromate. The sodium chromate, this thing may have operated off level or something, and the sodium chromate starts to crystallize a little bit. And I'm going to try to cut up some of these things to see if we can find that, okay? And so what a lot of guys will say is turn your refrigerator upside down or bang on it with a hammer. And what that does is in your refrigerator, you got big loops and big pipes and small pipes, okay? And so this flake of toast is floating around inside of here and it gets lodged in something and causes a blockage. Banging on it with a hammer might free the blockage. Turning it upside down might free the blockage. It's going to come back, and the whole purpose of the sodium chromate in there is to act as an anti-rust inhibitor. So if the stuff's starting to crystallize and not be sodium chromate in solution anymore, then that means the ammonia is starting to get a little bit of an upper hand. And remember what the sodium chromate was in there for? To keep it from rusting the pipes. So now sodium chromate is not as strong as it used to be. The ammonia starts to get the upper hand. Now you have a leaker and you have a rupture. So if you have a leaker or a blockage, then replace the cooling unit. I love Cool Fun RV. We've been working with Chris for a couple years now. They're doing a great job. So you either have a problem with your ventilation or you have a leaker or a blockage. So there you go.